join me in welcoming Matthias Stenberg.
Wow, all right. Morning. Come on, morning. All right. I hope you guys have had a good conference so far. Welcome to day 3, right? Has gone so quick, right? We've seen a lot of amazing presentations. Paolo, Burkhardt, the panel, it's been great. You know, it's going to be, will be hard for me to compete with here this morning, I think, but also 3 days is a long time to wait, right? I mean, if you went to Starbucks and ordered a coffee and they said, that would be 3,800 minutes. That's how it felt a bit for me. But I waited, right? And then, I mean, two sporting events we've also managed to decide in these 3 days. Congrats to the Denver Nuggets and the Vegas Knights last nights. Or I could have stayed in my room and watched all 8 seasons of Game of Thrones back to back. But I waited. So did you guys. So thank you very much for hanging around and waiting for this keynote. And I appreciate it. You know, God, let's hope it's worth it, right? So I want to start with saying thank you. We have, I think they told me that this is the biggest registration we've had since, I think, 2014. So clearly, you guys are back. Thank you very much. Let's do a little test. How many people in the audience are fellow Europeans like me? Make some noise, Europeans. Come on. How many? OK. OK. How many Americans in here? Always the loudest, right? Always. How many people are here from Asia? OK, thank you, guys. Any Swedish people? Yeah, I know Ola is here at least. OK, perfect. So the theme of my presentation today is the only break your business needs. And I will take you through and argue here in the next 40 minutes or so that there's never been a better time than right now to make a break or a break away from the past. And that, in fact, all you need to do that you already have. So that will be the story. And I think all people, including me, are looking for the next big break, right? And there are different kinds of people. I'm going to start here today and talking about 3 different types of people. If I can get the slide moving there. So, starting with those who watch things happen. Then you have the people who wonder what happened. And of course, the people we really want to talk about are those who make things happen. So what do I mean by this? Well, if we start with the people who watch what happened, or watch what happens, you know, I could go dark here, right, and talk about the increasing trend of people filming disasters on their mobile phones rather than actually helping out in the situation. But I thought we'll start with a lighter touch here this morning and talk a little bit about cycling and the Tour de France. So you have a lot of people going to an event like that, watching, well, people and actually all kinds of species apparently. And they're there to watch, but sometimes they get a little bit too excited. And one fan here with a sign, well, turned the race into an obstacle course and caused the biggest crash last year where she took down the whole peloton. So what's the moral of the story? It is, I think, A, don't be a watcher, but if you're a watcher, that's your role, stick to your role. So no stage invasions here today. You're here to watch, right? OK. But if we take that example and move it into business, you've all heard the story, of course, of Blockbuster, but I felt it's just too perfect not to use, right? Their CEO, Jim Keyes, once said, neither Redbox or Netflix are even on our radar screen when it comes to competition. Right? Famous last words. All he could do was watch Netflix kind of sail into the future with streaming capabilities. If we then look at the people who wonder what happened, I'm going to show you a little clip here, but to set it up, this is from the Olympics in 2002, and it is about an Australian speed skater called Stephen Bradbury. But let's play the clip. So, lucky to even make the finals, right? Bradbury is dead last in the race here. He's the guy in the green suit. He was not expected to even make the finals, but he hung in there. But as they're coming into the last curve here, something unexpected happens. Great, right? I mean, those guys certainly wonder what happened there, right? And I'm sure Australia did too. That's the only guys you will win anything in the Winter Olympics, right? No, that was maybe not nice. Okay. But again, let's take a more serious example, a business example. And I'm going to tell a little story about a company that has invested many, many millions into their IT infrastructure. They had to cater to a growth in users from roughly 1 million in 2011 to today they have about 380 million users. So massive investments in their IT infrastructure, cybersecurity, etc. You have a guess which company I'm talking about? Okay. I'm talking about Spotify. So despite all of these investments, in October 2022, their whole site crashed. It went down. And they certainly wondered what happened. Had they been the victims of some cyber attack, a malicious event? No, it was in fact one person alone who took down their site. Any guess who it was? Nobody? Okay. It was Taylor Swift. Her new album, Midnights, I don't know if anybody heard that. Well, neither have I, to be honest. But apparently 280 million people have heard it, because that's how many people went on the site when the album was released. So a platform with millions of users, a massive infrastructure, but they also were left wondering what happened as the site crashed. Okay. So, you know, clearly watching and wondering isn't a very good business strategy. So I want to talk about the people who make things happen. And I'm going to argue that it's the kind of people we have in this room today. So how do I know that? Well, I think just by the very fact that you're here this morning, this week, shows that you're willing to learn, you want to be open-minded, you want to be innovative, and you're looking to make the next big break. Right? Yes? Good. So who is in the room today? Let's have a look. So a long, long list. Very impressive names there, I think. A lot of these companies are leaders in their respective industries. And I want to take just a moment to, again, say thanks and recognize each and every one of you for coming here. And in many, many cases, you know, for decades of partnership. It means the world to HxGN and to me personally. So if you don't mind, if you could give all these companies a round of applause, so say thank you. Thank you very much. So what do you guys have in common? All of the names on this list. You all want to break. You can't leave yet, though. I'm not done yet. But I'm going to argue that your business does need a break. And I'm going to argue that we can help you. But first, we're going to do a little math lesson. here's something that's really hard to break. It's a trend. In algebra and science, it's called a sigmoid function, or S-curve for short. It's a curve that illustrates the trend of an emerging market, could be a technology, and really any business will be on a curve like this. We all use words like being on the learning curve, being ahead of the curve, and it's also often used to predict what the future is going to look like for a business. And while you're in the growth and the scale phase, all good, right? This is exactly where you want to be. But what should you do before you hit that plateau and your business eventually goes into a descent? How do you know when you've hit such an inflection point? I mean, what is an inflection point? It's some significant event in your market, in your industry, a paradigm shift, if you will, that presents you with a choice. You can do nothing, take the pessimistic approach. Eventually, you will lose market share and you will end up wondering what happened, right? Or you can try to maintain the status quo, watch what's happening, make minor tactical tweaks, try to kind of keep your momentum. But I usually use the quote from Sun Tzu, right? The philosopher, he said, "Tactics without strategy is the noise heard before defeat." Or you can act boldly, right? Make things happen. Be optimistic, like Paolo talked about, and develop a strategy that incorporates innovation, adapt in a smart way. So let's look at a company who clearly picked option 3 in this scenario. I'm talking about NVIDIA. You heard from them the other day, right? They started out making GPUs for gaming platforms. That was their core business. They were the market leader for years. But about 12 years ago, they realized that their chips could be used in a much broader way. And they refocused on AI development. And today, obviously, we know they power about 90% of all AI platforms. And like Paolo mentioned also, their market cap is like $1 trillion. So clearly they've done well. And as you heard also the other day, they're now partnering with us at HxGN for detailed and accurate geospatial data and visualization. So again, clearly they know what they're doing. So they saw the inflection point and they made the break before the market started plateauing. But why are we at an inflection point right now? How do I know this, or why do I argue this? And it must be, or it could be maybe tiring for you guys to hear, because I say this every year. Believe me, it's tiring for me to say, but there is no greater need for change than right now. So how do I know this, or how can I argue this? Well, if you just look at the high-level data, starting at the very highest level, look at GDP growth. You know, since the Industrial Revolution, so let's say the last 300 years, this is what the curve looks like, right? It's grown massively. Life has improved, life expectancy, economic growth, etc. So what has this curve led to, simplified? Population growth, right? We've gone from about 4 billion to 8 billion in the last 50 years. So all good, right? Population growing, economy growing. Has there been any side effects to this, do you think? Yes. I'm not going to dwell on this. You know this, but clearly the carbon emissions have exploded, you could say. So clearly we are at an inflection point. I would even call it a choke point. None of us can sustain economic growth the way we used to do it. We can't watch what's happening, and we don't want to wonder what just happened. We are, as I talked about before, using the resources of 2 Earths, right? We thought the world was big enough, we thought the atmosphere was clean enough, and that our business model could just go on forever making money. But we need to break from those old growth models. So unless you guys know how to create another planet, we have some problems to solve. I see specifically 3 of them. I call this the Energy Trilemma, where on the one hand, we need a clean energy transition, right? We need to reduce carbon emissions. That's very clear. At the same time, we need energy to be available. We need to meet demand. Demand keeps rising and rising, right? What is it? I said this last year, I think. 18% of the world's population don't have access to electricity today. So it needs to grow. And the thing that probably people talk the least about is that it also needs to be affordable, right? So that's the trilemma. And I found a quote by the founder of OpenAI, Sam Altman, who said that the correlation of quality of life and the cost of energy is huge. And I couldn't agree more, right? The fact is, we all want clean energy, and the investments there must increase exponentially. But the uncomfortable truth is that when it comes to availability and affordability, we have not solved those either. So what can we do? Well, clearly number one, which is also going on in the world, but investments in greener technologies needs to increase, 10x at least. And research into the whole circular economy, basically using resources more than once, also needs to increase and be adopted more widely. And finally, if we can't build much more production for many different reasons, we simply need to do more with what we have. So simplified, you could say we need to be twice as good. And this is the part of the solution I'm going to focus on today, because I think here is probably where HxGN can help you the most. And I'm going to argue that we are uniquely positioned to do that. And admittedly, maybe 10 years ago, we were not. But I'm going to tell you a little story using S-curves and argue that today we actually are. Okay. So this is how we used to define ourselves, right? These three market segments: process, power, and marine. This was a very successful business for us for many, many years. We were the market leader and still are. But yeah, it was growing fast, etc. So why would we ever change from this? Two reasons. Much like NVIDIA did, we realized that our technology could be used in many, many more different industries and applications. So we saw growth opportunity. And also, we saw an inflection point because we wanted more legs to stand on, be more diversified. And it was not only us changing, it was all of you guys as well. I've talked to many customers here this week, and one of them told me, an EPC customer, he said that, those markets, Matthias, process, power, and marine, it used to be 80% of our projects. Today, it's maybe 20, 25. So, you guys have changed as well. So it's not only us. So how do we define ourselves today? Like this, right? Asset life cycle intelligence. Not by the end markets we serve, more by the role we play in helping our customers manage the assets that are critical to your business operations. And it all really starts with how we think about assets. This is a picture or a slide from 2017. Anybody recognize that guy? I was here in Vegas and presenting to you guys much like today. And this was, I guess, our big, bold statement then. And, an industrial facility that thinks for itself, putting data to work in new ways so your organization could leverage data autonomously. So standing here 6 years later, do I still stand by this statement? I would say yes, pretty much, but I would argue there's one thing I got wrong. I know it's weird, but I was wrong once. I was really stuck in old thinking here, I think. I was thinking about our old S-curve. I would not define assets today just like an industrial facility. I would talk about, define it much broader. If we take a look at the room today, this is just a sample selection of all the assets represented here today. You're all in the asset business, right? Some of you design them, some of you engineer and construct them, some of you operate and maintain them, and depending on the role, we deal with all kinds of different things, right? Designs, plans, diagrams, reports, materials, coordination, project performance, handover of all the stuff, workers, shifts, maintenance, operations, accidents, security, so a lot of stuff, right? So in terms of being twice as efficient, I would argue we have set the scene by really multiplying the number of assets we cover. But what about the life cycle then? Well, we broke away from that one as well, I would say. In the past, I would say maybe 15, 20 years ago, this was the majority of our business, or most of it, right? Plan and design, that's what we did. And this is still a very big chunk of our business, and we continue to invest massively in this. And on the screen here, you see some of the latest innovations in the visualization and 3D technology. But if I were to simplify what we've done in this area the last 5, 6 years, it's really been about investing into two things: integration technology and user experience interface, right? So less on feature functions. But we didn't stop there. I mean, we saw, I would say when I joined here, I talked to a lot of customers, and most of you guys invested most of your money in the plan and design phase. But the reason why projects were late, etc., was not usually that. It was because of the execution phase, the construction phase, right? So we set out to make massive investments in the construction area. We innovated, but we also made a whole range of acquisitions there. Ecosys, Brixis, we developed Smart Build, we acquired a company called Jovix, one called iConstruct, and we also partner with our sister division, right, Geosystems, to be able to use sensors like this to monitor the construction progress. So that was, you could say, the second S-curve in our evolution. And now, the last couple of years, we've went on a new S-curve that I call HxGN ALI, where we really entered into the operate, maintain, and secure phase of your businesses, or the life cycle of the industry. And why did we do this, right? Well, clearly, it's a natural extension, right? You design something, you build it, and you operate and maintain it. But also clearly because of the inflection point we saw. So through groundbreaking innovations like SDX, which is really our data hub platform, you could say, and also like acquisitions into enterprise asset management with Infor EAM, and a couple of smaller ones like J5, AKMS, PAS. Soon we bought the whole alphabet, right, Ola? So we've really, I would argue, have built out a complete offering. Doesn't mean that it will end here. I'm sure we'll find another S-curve eventually. I'm not going to make the same mistake and say that this is it. But I truly think we have a foundation to enable you guys to create truly smart digital realities. And our vision and what we're working towards here is that all of these steps and processes should be connected in a native, integrated data level way, right? And I think the good news for you, and I usually say this to customers, it doesn't maybe always benefit me, but doesn't mean that you always have to buy a lot of new software. Many, many times you already have that. When I meet customers, they can have 10, 15 of our solutions in these different boxes, but they don't necessarily always know that. Could be a different department, different division, different country. So many times we can help you get more out of what you already have. That would be my argument. So let's say you do that. You start to integrate these different technologies and pieces of the life cycle. What would that kind of system enable you to do? Well, hopefully, harvest the data, right? Create intelligence. So there was no accident that we tagged intelligence to the end of our name, right? I would argue it's the whole future of our business as well as yours. But let's take a look what some really smart people said about intelligence before we define it. You know, Stephen Hawking said, the measure of intelligence is the ability to change. And Einstein talked more about its imagination, not knowledge. And Donald Trump also had something to say. And doesn't happen often, but I actually agree with Trump here. At least half of it. That intelligence is the greatest asset. So intelligence to me really is the next S-curve you need to get to. Without even getting into the details of each and every one of your business models, I can tell you if it doesn't include intelligence, it will fail. So if we go back again to 2017, what has changed other than that I've gotten older? Technology has changed, right? It's enabled us with cloud and other things, AI. We can do a lot more things. AI has become mainstream, right? At least very accessible. So I ran a little test the other day using ChatGPT to see how good it really is. So here's what I asked it. I said, how is intelligence critical to asset management? And this is, I'm not making this up. You can try this when you leave here and see that it's actually, this is what happened. So I said that, or I typed that. This is what it came back with. Clearly too much information for my attention span, right? So I said, can you please summarize that into bullets? And then it said this. So I think pretty good. Right? I think that's pretty close to what I would have written or what our strategy team would have come up with. Right, Mark? So that does make you wonder, though, what kind of jobs will this impact? And I heard Will.i.am talked about that the other day as well, right? Will all jobs be impacted? I think probably most of them. But it doesn't mean that a human isn't needed, right? And I found a couple of good examples, I think, of where a human is still needed. I saw this on Twitter the other day. I think that would be a problem, right? And I read another story in the paper about a lawyer in the US who asked ChatGPT to come up with cases, previous cases to help him support his story. And he found 5 of them through ChatGPT. What was the problem? They were all made up. Right? So he argued it in court and clearly lost. So, will AI take your job? I don't think so, but a colleague or another applicant with AI expertise might. So I like the way Microsoft talks about it when they call it a co-pilot. I think that's what it is to me, or an enabler. And my final argument would be, again, going back to Sweden, 200 years ago in Sweden, 80% of the population was in farming, agriculture. Today it's about 1.5%. Does that mean that nobody in Sweden works anymore? Clearly not, right? Why? Because they adapted, they changed. And that brings me back to my favorite quote of the 3 we looked at. The measure of intelligence, in my opinion, is the ability to adapt to the change. So why is change so bloody difficult then? Well, because it's oh, there it goes. Okay. Because it's easy staying with the pack, right? Breaking away is very difficult. It requires a lot of energy and risk, but the return and the reward can be worth it. I'm going to play you a little clip here of some cool breakaways. Okay, pretty cool, right? And I loved how that video ended with cycling, because to me that's probably the best example of breaking away. If you look at a cycle race, where do most of the riders gravitate? In the peloton. That's the big group of riders, right? Why do they hang out there? Because they get help with the headwinds. So the peloton is a pretty safe and relatively successful place to be. But nobody in the peloton will ever win the race, right? If you want to win the race, you have to break away. And that is very true in business as well. Think of business as usual as the peloton. Nothing daring or too risky. But to break away, I would argue we all have to accept some level of risk. But how can we, or how do we, minimize the risk and increase or maximize the chance of success? Well, there are two criteria, I would argue, that are relevant to think about to do that. And the first one is around the terrain, or to translate it to business, the setting, the current state of your industry or market. If you look at the cycling example again, if you try a breakaway during the flat stage of a race, your success rate is roughly 2%. But if you do it in the mountain stages, it grows exponentially and is roughly 40%. So how is this relevant to business? Well, clearly, you have a bigger chance when it's challenging conditions. We all know how hard it is to get people to change when things are going seemingly good. But we all know that that S-curve is going to plateau at some point. So maybe a challenging business environment like the one we're having now with the energy transition may be the best thing that ever happened to your business. The second criteria I want to talk about is strength in numbers. If you look at the cycling example again, and you look at the number of riders, when they attempt a breakaway, you can see the percentages increasing, depending on if it's one rider, 15, 16, etc. So what does this mean if we translate it to business? It means you have a greater chance of breaking away if you have a strong team and you have strong partners. And obviously, being here at HxGN Live, I want your partner to be Hexagon. And again, I don't mean that as a collection of products. I mean that in the sense of our people, our technology, a true partnership. And to help maybe speed this up, I am happy to announce here today something that we call HxGN Advantix. Like Paolo said the other day, we like to put an X in every name, right? This is not a product. It's a value engineering methodology. We are going to partner with you in a much tighter way in an engagement to really look at your business case, your ROI, and make sure you get the value out of what you have bought before, during, and after any digital transformation initiative. So get in touch if you're interested about that. But that's, I'm going to stop selling there. And I want to finish this presentation with another cool example. And I'm going to tell you a little story. But before I go into the story and the company I'm talking about, I'm going to run a little test. So let's see if you notice anything strange as I play this music. Anything strange with that? No? Well, Spotify would have thought so, that it was strange, because it was about a 1, maybe 1.5 second delay when I pressed the button before the music started. This was the problem that Spotify was trying to tackle when they, took over this industry. The delay when you were choosing a song. And this guy, the CEO, Daniel Ek, he made it his mission to solve this. He told his development team and his CTO that that delay needs to be less than 0.2 of a second, because apparently that's so little time that the human mind can't perceive the delay. So when he said that, the CTO said, "You're asking for the impossible." Because basically, to get to that kind of speed, he would have needed to add so many servers that Spotify would have been bankrupt. So get the speed down, but don't add any servers. That was the mission. And how did they do this? Well, basically, they used predictive analytics and so on, AI, to predict what song you are going to play next. So think about that next time you use Spotify and, maybe try to trick it, right? You play some Metallica and then Mozart and then Celine Dion or something, and it will struggle. But I really love this story because it's about overcoming the impossible. It's about a team that met some constraints that seemed impossible at first, but they broke away from traditional thinking and found a way forward. So I would argue it's the same here in this room today. Everything we need to do exactly what Spotify and NVIDIA did is in this room. And it reminds me of this quote I saw, which talked about never underestimate the power of a small group of committed people to change the world. In fact, it's the only thing that ever has. So you are the people and the companies that will make this change happen. And I know there are constraints. You hear things, it's not the right time, it's too risky, it's too complicated. We're comfortable. You know who else was comfortable, right? Blockbuster. So we need to break from our own constraints to build businesses that are both profitable and sustainable. In short, again, we need to be twice as good. So don't be the watchers, don't be the wanderers, make it happen. So my final question to you here today is, will you guys make the break? Thank you very much. Enjoy the rest of the week. Cheers.